The year is 1847, the worst year of the famine that first hit Ireland in 1845. A blight has hit the potato crop, the main food of Ireland. With no other source of income and living on tiny plots of land, unable to support other crops, the Irish tenant farmers are unable to buy or grow food, nor pay the high rents absentee English landlords charge for living on the Lord's land. The Irish slowly starve to death or succumb to disease. Those lucky enough to survive the sickness and starvation flee the country, with over 2 million Irish boarding ships predominantly to America. In America, the Irish arrived in major port cities, notably New York City. From New York, many made their way to Connecticut either via ferry or the New Haven Railroad to pursue jobs. And what did this first large-scale wave of immigrants face in Connecticut? Discrimination from the descendants of the same stock of English under whom they had endured poverty, famine, and religious intolerance in Ireland. This discrimination was the outward face of the great debate on whether or not these newly arrived immigrants should have the same rights as the natives.
This part of Connecticut was really almost a homogeneous type of population. The vast majority were white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant.
The Irish represented the first non-Yankee, non-English minority to settle in Connecticut. They were also poor and generally unskilled. More importantly, however, the Irish were Roman Catholic, which aroused fears among the Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority. Their reaction was to demonize, discriminate against, harass, and exclude the immigrants. According to one historian, American nativists used Protestant pulpits and press to instruct Americans concerning the true nature of the Catholic Church. Behind a facade of piety and religion, according to the nativists, was a papal plot to conquer the world. The arrival of the Irish coincided with the industrialization of Connecticut. However, for the most part, the Irish were unskilled laborers and faced discrimination in this area as well. Because of their low status, the men took difficult, dangerous jobs that no one else wanted, such as digging canals, building railroads, working in brass foundries, and in construction. The women were mainly employed as domestic servants in the homes of the well-to-do. The Irish were hardworking and were considered cheaper and expendable because they would work for any money they could get. As the Irish became more skilled, they faced another type of employment discrimination. People on the lower rungs of the social ladder feared that the Irish would take their jobs away in their quest to improve their lifestyle.
By only offering the most menial, low-paying tasks, it was a way of keeping the Irishmen down. It was very, very hard for them to, but somehow they survived.
Irish seeking jobs, such as working in a store, might find a sign stating "No Irish need apply," a stark reminder of the fact that they were different and unwelcome. The Irish were even resented by freed slaves for taking the only jobs the former slaves could fill. The Irish were also stereotyped as lazy, drunken, and violent. People did not sell land to them because they did not want Irish Catholics in their neighborhood. The Catholic children sat through teachings from the Protestant Bible despite their parents' protests.
The Protestants used the King James Bible, which was not the same Bible the Catholics used. The two of them might have said 90% of the same thing, but it was recognized at the schools in here that religion was taught, and it was the predominant Protestant religion which was taught.
Catholic churches in Norwalk and Hartford were burned to encourage Catholics to leave. Anti-Irish Catholic sentiment reached a peak in 1852 with the creation of the American Party, also known as the Know Nothing Party.
Officially they were called the American Party, but when asked what they stood for, they said, "I know nothing." Well, what is this about you're not liking the Irish? We don't know anything about that. They deliberately kept no minutes of their meetings, and it was a very, very, very secretive organization.
The most important goal of the Know-Nothings was to keep Catholics from obtaining political power, for fear that their large numbers would try to elect Catholics into political office. This political party was especially powerful in Connecticut and was so influential that in 1855, a Know-Nothing, William T. Minor, was elected the governor of Connecticut. Minor proposed laws that prohibited citizens not living in the United States for 21 years from voting, and Catholics from holding elective office, along with revoking the charter of the 9th Regiment of the State National Guard, which was predominantly Irish. All of these examples were further evidence of the great debate about immigrant versus native rights. Despite this unwelcoming environment, the Irish were determined to make a better life for themselves. One way they proved their worthiness was in the Civil War, and events seemed to be working their way when the 9th Regiment was reinstated.
Most of your commissioned officers for both the Union and the Confederacy were Protestants, with their prejudice against these Catholic Irishmen. They were so impressed by their bravery on the battlefield that even during the war, many of them did a total about-face.
As one historian notes, the Irish lost the sense of inferiority and acquired the sense of belonging as they became more accepted by their fellow soldiers for their courage and bravery. In the years after the Civil War, the Irish slowly began to pull themselves out of poverty and took key jobs that would put them into the middle class, such as policemen and firemen. With their large numbers and organizational skills, the Irish became a force in the political arena as powerful Democrats. Hard work, better jobs, their unique ability to organize labor and boycott successfully, and politics helped them rise out of poverty. America began to see its first labor unions, social welfare legislation, child labor laws, and workmen's compensation, successes the Irish fought for as a result of the dangerous jobs they had endured. Another success is the Knights of Columbus, a mutual benefit insurance organization that was formed by Father Michael McGivney to provide funds for the families of injured or deceased members. However, successes do not come without failures. Although the Irish were quite powerful and successful in the political arena, some of their success came from less than desirable methods. The Irish used the political machine to get many votes, but they also resorted to violence to assert their rights and assure their economic well-being. They burned Protestant Bibles to retaliate against the discrimination. Another failure was that Irish support for the Union in the Civil War didn't necessarily mean opposition to slavery. Some thought freed slaves might put Irish jobs at risk, since both groups were competing for the same employment opportunities. Finally, society as a whole has failed time and again to learn lessons from the trials and tribulations of each new wave of immigrants. Each subsequent group that followed the Irish, whether they were Chinese, Italian, Jewish, or Puerto Rican, faced similar discrimination and hardship. However, it wasn't just the same natives discriminating against these groups. The Irish discriminated against the Italians in the same way they had been treated. Today, this discrimination can be seen in the treatment of Hispanics and Muslims. One consequence of the Irish actions was the expansion of the Catholic Church. In 1835, there were only 720 Catholics in Connecticut out of a total population of 21,000. By 1846, the number had grown to 9,000, and only a year later to 20,000 Catholics. This quick growth alarmed the natives. This expansion was also responsible for the formation of orphanages and Catholic hospitals. The Catholics also created the parochial school system because of the overwhelming Protestant teaching in public schools.
American education in the public schools was a very Protestant one. Well, as a reaction, they have their own schools.
The final action that proved the Irish were accepted was in 1961, when John F. Kennedy took the oath of office as the first Irish Roman Catholic president of the United States. The Irish had finally prevailed in rising above the discrimination to make their mark on the world, and honored the dreams of the first huddled masses that stepped foot on American soil.
If you look at the Irish experience in America, they're the first minority to become American. And I think this is hugely important to the study of subsequent ethnic groups in America. A group that is initially despised becomes quintessentially American. How do we do that? By becoming indispensable to the nation that we adopt, by being patriots, by being good citizens. And in that sense, the Irish experience in America is the template for the rest of us.